So what does Dr. Tan do when the proverbial hits the fan?
There's definitely multiple different plans, and it really depends on the type of threat. If it really was end of days, nuclear warfare, all systems down, and no one could eat, or no one had power, no one had clean water to drink. There's a lot of life-threatening things that can kill you within minutes to hours. Things are bleeding, things are broken, you might have spinal injury, your brain might have some swelling, your life's on the line. We're training people not only in medical skills, but also survival skills, because I think at the end of days, those two skills and those concepts are very, very important, and it becomes real for a lot of different people. People are starting to wake up to the trajectory of what's going on. You start to feel that vulnerability. What should I have so that my family doesn't suffer like that? At that point, once your muscles are being broken down, your organs are next on the list. It is something I would never wish on my worst enemy, that feeling of starvation.
Like, if we're trying to get survival lessons from this, some of the reasons why people left on your season were giardia, as you said, heart palpitations, which could have been something induced by stress maybe, or maybe that person had a pre-existing condition, parasitic infection, somebody fell, stomach inflammation, and then towards the end, things like starvation, sickness were what finally caused people to tap out. So it's interesting to see that those are the waterborne pathogens, like you said, basically, tripping and falling on something. If you can endure all that, and if you can find a good system to get past that, you're really just contending with calories after that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So all of those things, that wouldn't have made me tap. All those things that were the reasons why people left, like, were not even an option for me, because I knew like I could either prevent that or treat that pretty reliably.
Bears. Let's talk about bears, because this is probably one of the biggest things that people get that scare them off the show. In spite of the fact that I don't think anybody's ever had a bad bear encounter on alone. Like, I don't think anybody's ever been mauled or
charged.
Even, I mean, I think there's been some encounters. I know Joe Robinet had an encounter. There's a couple guys that have tapped because they thought they've heard bears. But you're in Labrador, so that's polar bear country. What were your thoughts on that? Like, if you ever were going to encounter that, how did you do you find yourself like wargaming this? Did you see any wild animals? How prepared were you to deal with a situation like that?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because like at a certain point, it's no matter how big that predator is, once you're hungry, you're like at that game space where you're saying like, if that comes at me, I want to take it because I want that fat, I want that fur, I want all those resources, because you're basically hungry, and that's where your head is. It's no longer like, I'm scared of this. It's like, come at me because I want to eat you type of deal. So there was a war game type of mindset in that respect, where
like, you wanted to see it, but you didn't want to see it.
Exactly. So it was like, how is your chest rig set up? How's your like weapons set up, so that if it does come, where are your routes that you would funnel them in, that they would be stuck in, and then you can take some shots at it. And after that, what can you use? Because there are some defensive things that we have there, some safety items for bear control. So what can disorient it and then take it the shot?
So they do give you a few like backup items.
Some safety stuff.
Are we allowed to say that? Are we allowed to disclose that? Or?
You can. So on Alone Season 9, you can see that people have bear spray on the rigs and stuff like that. So whatever you see on the show.
But you can't use the bear spray for any other purpose or anything like that. Interesting.
But if it was a polar bear, like that's self-defense, right?
Absolutely.
That'd be different from hunting something. So that would be something that would be in your armory. But again, that button's not going to do you any good in that situation.
Well, I had a survival instructor tell me once that you really got to look at nature. Like, you see these little creatures fight off big creatures, and you're like, how the hell can a honey badger fight off 2 lions? It's not physically capable of doing that. Like, it doesn't, it's the ferocity, it's the tenacity, it's the energy you emit, it's the don't fuck with me energy that you emit. So what were your strategies had you encountered one? Did you have like a spear? Did you have some Rambo stuff set up? Were you ready to go? Like, what was your plan? Were you just going to try to shoot it with a bow?
So when I was hunting black bear on there, because there was sign on my location and there was a berry patch on the ridge line, I was specifically looking at where it was traveling. So you can look at some tracks. And then based on those tracks, are there fallen trees? Are there cover that, like, if you do take a shot, they would not know where it's coming from? If there's a location where you need to get out of that situation really quickly, what would be the best route for that? And it's very similar to like a close quarter combat and tactical stuff, because as you're going into a room or as you're engaging an opponent, you do need to know where cover to cover is, or concealment to concealment is. You need to know where that evacuation point is. And that military training did kind of play a role in that circumstance, because my ambush was that trail for that animal. So I had multiple different locations where I could have physical type of cover where the bear would have difficulty reaching me. So you take a shot, run after that, or take a shot from that location. Areas where I could kind of camouflage a little bit, some hunting blinds. But at the same time, there would be areas to areas where I knew that if I take a shot here and they came here, I could bear spray and then go to the secondary location and then take another shot there. And then from that location, I could really get out of that area in a very fast pace, because it's downhill in a very streamlined situation. So if you're doing all those things and planning it out, it's better than like, oh, found a bear, take a shot, wasn't enough to kill it, and now it's going to maul me. So being intentional about that procedure as well. And I wouldn't say like I had a spear, because I only had like my Leatherman and my axe, but I did have a bunch of war clubs. And my time with the Maasai, who literally traditionally hunted lions with that setup, that's the types of clubs that I was building out there.
What's a war club?
So in Ma, it's called the arungu, and it's basically a very high dense piece of wood, typically from roots, that you carve out, like it's almost like a bulb. And I was finding that if that arrow didn't kill my animals, I wanted to dispatch it very quickly. So that's why I made those war clubs. So I'd literally go up, shoot it, and run up and club it over the head, and then that would dispatch them. So
it's basically something that has a lot of mass on the end.
Yeah.
So you get that.
Yeah, that force. Yeah, absolutely. And it's not a heavy thing to wield as well. So it's not a.
So you were ready to club a bear if it jumped out at you.
I mean, there were people on Alone who basically took down musk oxes with a knife. You know, if you've seen
really,
yeah, so that's a big animal. That's like 700
how
plus
did they
pounds.
not win?
So I think it was probably like an old ox, but he took a shot from a very far location, and then he was so hungry that he was literally running up and stabbing it, taking cover, running up and stabbing it, taking cover. And he did that for like, I think over like 20 minutes until that ox bled out.
So was this guy on your season?
No, he was Alone season 7, I believe.
Was he the winner?
He was the winner.
Of course.
Yeah.
So he had musk oxen meat. That's all. That's like probably.
That's pretty good. The thing that you have to contend with after you have that big kill is all the scavengers. Right. So once you have those scavengers at your place, like I think he had a lot of his fat stores stolen from those scavenger animals. Like wolverines.
Yeah.
Wolverines are big ones.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's, even if you get the kill, you got to contend with all the competition who's out there trying to get the kill with you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any other advice that you have just in terms of, a person's in that solitary situation, they're on their own, they're scared, they don't know what to do. You talk about grounding techniques in some of your videos. You talk about having an awareness of focusing on one thing. Is there any other just as a segue, because the topic of bears is quite terrifying for a lot of people. What were some psychological strategies that you used, and was there any periods on the show where you thought, man, I just can't hack this?
I think the most powerful thing that I would recommend to your viewers is knowing how to structure connection. So One of the big things, like I said, the main reason or the powerful reason why people are able to push beyond what they think they're capable of is having some kind of relationship outside of themselves. So for me, day 40, I was like, okay, I've eaten here. I've built a shelter that's pretty bomb proof. What am I fighting for? I think that was the big thing. And I think a lot of people in that bug out situation who may be there for months, years, what are you living for? You know? And that thought, that word to yourself needs to be a conversation before that bug out situation. So much more before it, that as soon as you hit that moment where like, what am I doing this for? Like, how long am I going to push for? That you already have an answer for. That is so powerful, because you have a reason to survive longer. You have a reason to push further. And if it's for your kids, for your wife, or for so forth, like that's going to be the thing that really provides a foundation for energy, which would not make sense from a calorie standpoint. And a lot of people get into that trap where like, oh, I'm only eating 200 calories a day, I can't go on. But once you have that connection, that relationship, you're like, I have to go on. There's no other choice. And I think the second step is connecting with the environment itself. So if you are truly alone, what is your way to connect with the land and nature? If you are there as a student, and nature and the wilderness and whatever ancestors on the land is your teacher, then you know whatever hardship that you have is a lesson. And once you realize that or accept that, you know that every single blessing that you have out there is a gift. And that's a lot of a very different standpoint and perspective to have compared to like, today I failed my mission today. I didn't get the food. I didn't get the shelter. I didn't get what I was looking for, versus like, they're doing this to teach me this thing. And to actively say that, hey, I need this thing, help me. Because once you receive whatever you're looking for, whether that's food, whether that's shelter, whether that's a resource, it does feel like someone's looking out for you. And that's like a very powerful feeling to have in that alone setting. And it's almost like a religious, spiritual thing. But no matter where you guys are coming from, whether you're religious or not, that power that comes from knowing that someone's looking out for you, that force that cannot be killed, that is in and of itself something that could make you survive a very long time.
The psychosomatic aspect of all of this is so important for people to realize, because in terms of motivation to do anything, and I often use the example of people who get out of bed every morning to do a job that maybe they don't like. I mean, it takes a lot of discipline to just do that. And then you'll have people say, well, I can't lose weight, or I can't kick this habit. But you think about just the fact that you're willing to go to a job that you don't like every single day takes such a huge level of commitment that it's because you're doing it because you need to pay your bills. It's survival. So there's no ruminating on, I don't want to, you're not overthinking it. You just go and you get it done.
Yep.
What I'm trying to say is, oftentimes I think people, and maybe you would agree with this, tap out way too early when they don't have to tap out, but because something psychologically took them away from the experience.
I would 100% agree with that. Like a lot of the high level special forces always tell you in training, like, you got 10% in you, you got a little bit more. And once you break it down to like, okay, what's the one thing that I know I can do for a fact, and break it down in that level. It's like, for me, like, could I survive another 60 days? That didn't feel doable, but could I do it one more day, one more afternoon, one more step? And once you break it down there and you're just doing one more step and one more step and one more step, you'd be surprised how far you can push yourself.
There was a movie about two guys who, it's a true story. I think it was it K2, one of those mountains, tallest mountain in the world. And it was a survival story. And they said the exact same thing that you said, in that the only thing that allowed this one guy to get back to base camp, his friend died or something like that, was that, like, he had frostbite, he had a broken ankle, and basically he was crawling down this mountain. And the only thing that kept him alive was focusing on that next step, as opposed to, it's 10 miles away. Can I just, pull myself one more meter and just keep focusing on that. But it's such a powerful thing. And like you said, most people, I think, only ever go to 60%, 70%. I think few people have really pushed themselves to the limit. Like, to push yourself to the limit is death. 99%, you're probably doing some permanent damage.
Yep.
90%, maybe you're just skirting that line where you're, that's kind of right where you want to be. But I guess the lesson here would be that you can push yourself a lot further than you think if you get into the right mindset. Because there's physical capability, and then there's the mental, which typically just gets in the way of that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like, train your mind, train your heart so that your body respects its command. If you have a weak mind and a weak spirit, like, you can crumble when you shouldn't.
How did you deal with the solitude? Did you feel, one thing I noticed when I was out in the bush for long periods of time is that I felt dumb. I felt like I was losing my something,
Your mind.
Like I thought I was going to have these profound insights in words, but the insights don't come in words. It's almost like it's just an experience, because you just, like you say, it's a sensory thing. It's not how did you deal with being alone?
So one of the things that I did was, I knew that the alone factor would have been something that could have played on my mind. So I made an active decision to find relationships wherever I could. Not necessarily drawing a Wilson on my boot or anything like that. But one thing that was very profound early on is that as I was going on this very old land, I was noticing trees that were bent in a very unnatural way, almost like an L shape. And in those circumstances, those were areas that were cooking areas for indigenous peoples way back when. So that was kind of my cue to kind of reach out to that, if at all, because you're alone. What else are you going to do? So for me, I was saying, like, giving gratitude to that ancestor of the land and respecting whatever was out there, saying like, hey, thank you for like having me here. I am sorry that I'm still learning, like, can you help me for this, and the other? And to, again, receive from the land was almost like they were giving me their blessings to be there. And it almost plays a trick on your mind, saying like, okay, you're not 100% alone, because you have this whatever entity kind of teaching you and also giving you stuff. And it was to the point where every grouse that I got, I had like a wishbone. I would place it down as like a little offering and saying like, hey, tomorrow I want one thing specific. I want meat. I want this resource. I want this. And it came to the point where I was almost mystified, because like the next day I would get that thing. I was like, oh shit. Like either I'm kind of going crazy or something's happening, but either way, you're connecting with that land, connecting with whatever. And then I started to do it with like people who've passed. So like my grandfather, with friends who passed at a very young age. And I was just like talking to them, being like, hey, like I did this crazy thing. I'm doing this crazy thing right now. I'm not sure if you're listening or watching, but like, I just want to talk to you. And then to have these subtle signs, whether it's like a raven kind of watching you every single day, you get these subtle signs, and it's almost like you feel surrounded. And like that was my biggest kind of game changer for me, because I didn't feel alone when I was out there. I felt incredibly surrounded and supported.
Well, you're surrounded by living things, right? There's this bio-spiritual avatar-like thing happening where you're out there and you're having this relationship with the environment, and you're becoming so in tune with its rhythms because your survival depends on it. Even if you weren't a religious person or a spiritual person, there's a science going on there that's maybe deeper than what is immediately apparent. I don't want to start talking all transcendental or anything, but there's definitely an energy component to this somewhere, right? Where those things they're with you in the process of trying to not die. Like you're all trying to not die. There's a little bit of competition, but the earth as a whole is facilitating your existence. It's trying to help you survive. And because you're the apex predator, right? The earth wants you to win. So if you can kind of tap into that, it's all a part of a system, and you find out exactly where you fit in that system. And the better you can do that, the better the chances of your survival.
Yeah.
But if you go in there thinking like, I'm just going to, start terraforming, like get into like civilization mindset where you're going to try to micromanage and control everything, it might work to an extent. I don't know. Yeah. How much, like in terms of the actual show dynamics. So there's 10 people. Is that 10 contestants? Are you guys pretty close to each other?
I can't say the exact distance, but it's enough to not know that they exist and not know where they are. Like you don't see smoke trails, you don't smell them, you don't hear them, you don't see them.
How do they decide who goes where?
It's random.
It's just random. So
you can have the shittiest location, and that's what you have to deal with.
Is there really a shitty location, or is every location have its pros and cons?
I think every location should have what you need to survive, kind of a source of food, some things to make shelter and fire, and then some water sources. Like they're not going to necessarily send you in the middle of a location where there's zero water. That would not be fair. So they do have some basic amenities, but
even that, maybe no water, but maybe there's some other advantage. Well, they would, but maybe there's trade-offs, right? Like
there's definitely like some locations in the past that have been more amenable to fishing, and some locations more amenable to hunting and trapping. So you might get that.
So when you're coming back to civilization, there's a scene in one of my favorite movies. Actually, I guess there's two scenes from two of my favorite movies. One is Apocalypse Now. The other is Rambo. And in both of these scenes, they're coming out of the war zone, but they just got to get back in to the thick of things. Did you feel when you first came out, you have a video on your YouTube channel, which I'd encourage people to go and subscribe to, where you're talking about, the first video you did and the first time you're seeing yourself in the mirror after you're coming out of this experience. Was there a part of you when you got back to civilization that just wanted to go and sleep on the ground, or were you liking being in a bed?
So when I finished my season, I basically had to go back to work within a month. So at that point I lost like over 60 pounds, was having to like rehab myself because I was coming back to Canada and had no doctors, no kind of like support. And it was very jarring to go from that experience to the ER, where there's a bunch of lights, loud sounds, a lot of distractions. And it's just kind of like going, if you were living in the jungle for like your whole life and then going to like New York City. And there was a part of me that just wanted to like stop all of that and just live in the bush. But like I think everyone who has that experience, and that was probably like my third or fourth time experiencing similar stuff. Because when I was doing my research and also volunteering overseas, like I'd be with Maasai tribes for an extended amount of time and then go back to the city. And I tend to miss is the piece that comes with like not having a schedule, like not having people call you, not like having any kind of obligation. Like that type of freedom is the thing that I think a lot of people who've been on that show and who live certain lives would experience in that kind of reverse culture shock.
Reverse culture shock.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see it, being sensory overload when you come back. I know when I did tree planting, which you're staying at a camp. It's like a work camp. Maybe the closest thing to civilization is a kitchen with a generator running. But even going back into the city from that was a pretty shocking sort of experience,
Absolutely.
So I could imagine being out there in the equilibrium of nature and then coming right back into the man-made world of right angles and synthetic everything. That must have been quite a shock to the system.
Absolutely. Like you kind of like, and everyone else in society like lives a very structured life that has all these obligations, And it's very rare that we live life outside of those obligations, responsibilities, expectations, social norms. And it is like something that I definitely miss. You know, I feel like if you are in a position where you are removed from, let's say, your friends and family, your cultural background, any kind of expectations, responsibilities, and so forth, that moment you have in that circumstance is a moment to be 100% yourself. Like there's no personas, no incentive to do one thing or the other. It's just you trying to discover and reconnect with who you are as a person and what you want to do with your life and what kind of impact that you want to have. And it's very hard to do that genuinely in the type of setup that we have in our modern day society.
And when you come back, when you're out there, it's kind of like, you ever did mushrooms before?
No.
Okay.
Have not had the pleasure.
When you do a psilocybin or a psychoactive psychedelic substance like that, it breaks up your ego. And it's very much like having done it and done the wilderness thing, they're very similar in the sense that the ego that gets diluted when you're out there. And when you come back into the world, you're Dr. Tan again, right? So you have to, okay, I'm the persona, like you talked about. You have to get in that mode and, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be this, I'm supposed to be that. And, you know, it's a totally different, in my opinion, it's a far more like fractured way of viewing the world. I always thought that Picasso, his paintings were trying to communicate that. He was trying to show how this is how man perceives the world through a social lens, jagged edges and distorted and stuff like that. And you know, when you go out into nature, you're in that. And again, this is not to romanticize nature because nature is brutal, but it's also to say that this world is difficult, you know, and that world has its set of challenges, but so does this one. But the switching from in between, you know, can be quite tedious, taxing on a person.
Incredibly taxing, for sure. One of the things that I'm very grateful for is like when you're in that situation and you know who you are, which can take years and years and years if you don't experience challenges like that, tests like that, is to align yourself when you come back to society with that type of mission, with that type of development. Because when you start resonating with that, like it just, things seem to align, you know, whether that's what you want to do in a career, the type of family you want to have, and so forth. Like when you're resonating with that, it's just like life seems a whole lot better.
Let's talk about prepping. What are your thoughts on preparedness culture? Why are people so interested in survivalism nowadays, in your perspective? What is the allure?
I think the allure for learning how to be more prepared, learning how to survive, is that people are starting to wake up to the trajectory of what things are going on, whether that's from a city standpoint where there's more gun violence or like mass shootings and that type of thing, or whether it's just like a supply chain issue where like we had one flood and no one could eat, or no one had power, no one had clean water to drink. And it becomes real for a lot of different people. And when you have that in such frequency, and the media is covering it, there's social media now that's like covering it, people, no matter what spectrum of politics or demographics of people you're coming from, you start to feel that vulnerability. And you start to question, what should I have so that my family doesn't suffer like that? Or if your family has suffered like that, what can I do so it doesn't happen again? You know, and what's the next threat, and how can I do that to be that type of support for my community and for my family unit?
So what does Dr. Tan do when the proverbial shit hits the fan? You're on the East Coast, United States. You're from, well, you're living in USA right now. What do you do if, you know, all hell breaks loose? What's your go-to plan if you have to? You live in a more rural suburb, kind of that interface between the rural and the suburbia. What is your game plan for if things go south?
So there's definitely multiple different plans, and it really depends on the type of threat. You know, like I feel like the US is a bigger target than Canada for sure. And I'm lucky enough to be a Canadian citizen. So going home is always an option. My family does have
He's
property.
going to leave the country.
Yeah. That's definitely a plan of mine. And then bringing...
Did you see the movie Civil War?
Yeah. I haven't. I really want to see it.
Well, part of the, it's a pretty common, it's a spoiler, but there's a scene in the movie where
they just leave the country.
No, they're trying to barter for gas, and they say we have such and such amount of money, and they're like, no, but then they're like, oh well, we have Canadian dollars, and then they're like, really, Canadian, because it's Canada is still intact apparently in this reality, which I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case, but anyway, sorry to interrupt you there. So your plan is to potentially bug out. I'm fairly young into my career, so I don't have the resources right now to like have a bunker, to have a bunch of different setups. But the good thing about being a physician in the type of capacity that I am now is that I do have some friends and some close allies that if it really was end of days, nuclear warfare, all systems down, it might be the case where I go and be the doctor for certain communities. And then it's just a pilot out with my family. There's a movie where this guy, I can't remember which movie it is, but part of the plot or the setting is that he's a doctor, but he doesn't want people to know he's a doctor because they're going to kidnap him to make him a part of the group. So just a tip, maybe don't be so quick to let on you're a doctor with everybody. Because they might try to kidnap you and make you work for them. But no, that's an amazing skill. I mean, that's one of the first, definitely in the top 10 of people you'd want in your preparedness group. So the fact that you have that barterable skill means you don't even really need anything. Because wherever you go, people are going to need your services. So, I mean, this is one of the classic examples of knowledge weighs nothing. And if you have that skill set, you're really set.
Yeah. So it's definitely something that I can provide value to the whatever community that I'm a part of. And it's something that gives me a lot of peace of mind too, because in all reality, there's a lot of life-threatening things that can kill you within minutes to hours. So if you can't manage that, bugging out or hunkering down, it starts to fade away really quickly if you're not able to manage that yourself.
Have you done anything along the lines of disaster relief?
In terms of my career, a lot of the disaster relief through the military is very kind of minor, not necessarily overseas. It's mostly with like ice storms in Quebec and that type of thing. But a lot of the nonprofit work, that was more of long-term relief. So more infrastructural things and less so like natural disaster things. So water and sanitation, food security and financial security, and also like women's rights as well, because in a lot of these countries, women have very limited rights. They don't have the ability to have their own bank account, own property, and that type of thing. That puts them in a very precarious situation.
Any other, just general preparedness advice you have for people?
So I would say people who are medically preparing often, especially if they're getting into it, don't have things to treat traumas. That's the one big thing that I notice. And even people who do have like a trauma first aid kit aren't necessarily equipped to know how to use it effectively. It can be as simple as using a tourniquet. And one mistake that I even see with instructors is as simple as the tourniquet's meant to stop a bleed, but also a pulse. They often forget the pulse part. And if you do, you turn that extremity into a one-way valve and cause something called compartment syndrome. And that kills off that extremity a lot faster than it would ever need to be if you're just having a tourniquet on for like an hour or two. So just that one thing, that one slip in information that literally took a few seconds for me to tell you. Like if you don't know that, you can cause serious harm to you or whoever you're treating if you don't have that specific training.
If you're going back to this word trauma, what's the difference and where's the line between trauma and just a minor injury? So
when I think about trauma, I think about things that have like a high velocity. So think about like motor vehicle accidents, IED going off, you getting in a ski accident or anything like that. And minor injury, it's more of like, okay, you twisted your ankle. You may have like a very superficial cut. But I would say traumas are the thing that, as an ER doctor, I'm preparing my ER for you to come here because you might die. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'd say life-threatening related to trauma, and not like emotional trauma. Like you're hurt bad, things are bleeding, things are broken. You might have spinal injury. Your brain might have some swelling. Your life's on the line. That's what I would kind of categorize.
Is there like a distinction, like acute, post-acute, or is there that distinction? Like you're talking about life or death.
Mm-hmm.
So preparing for trauma, I mean, there's obviously a person who doesn't have the training that you do is going to be limited in terms of what they can do. Hopefully you're going to show us today some tips and tricks and practical things. But you also run a website called Survival Doctors. Tell us a little bit about what your website is about and what are the services that you offer there.
Yeah, so Survival Doctors is all about putting the everyday individual and training them up into the point where they are at a level that they could treat and maintain and manage people, whether it's an acute injury or illness, all the way up to like multiple days, multiple weeks at a time. So that's why it's Survival Doctors. So whether you are like medically trained or not, I want to get you to the level of at least an early practicing doctor. And what we're doing right now is we're training people not only in medical skills, but also survival skills, because I think at the end of days times, those two skills and those concepts within those two topics are very, very important and meant together. So if you are learning about hypothermia, that's great if you know what it is and how you may treat it in a hospital setting. But if you don't have the survival skills to build a really adequate shelter and know how to maintain a good core body temperature, then it doesn't matter if you have like a few heat packs or have the tarp or whatever, because your environment's going to oftentimes win. Mm-hmm. So our job is to train people at a very high level, and mainly looking at families who want to get into that medical preparedness. So that's our goal for the next few years, getting 10,000 families trained. We offer both online training. That's pretty much, we start you from zero and then we go all the way up. And then we also have in-person training. And once you're trained at that high level, we do have expeditions where you can use all those skills and practice all those skills in a very functional way.
So how much does this cost for somebody who wants to like do the online course?
Mm-hmm. So the online course, if you just want to get your feet wet, it's 30 days, 4 free live lessons, kind of like this. And it's absolutely for free just to try it. And within those 30 days, I would give you money if you didn't learn 1 or 2 things that would save your life. Mm-hmm. Because we are literally going through the TCCC Tactical Combat Casualty Care guidelines, where you're going to be learning things that are related to advanced trauma life support, and at the very base, knowing the fundamentals of survival. So I want to get as many families educated as possible. So the entry is pretty much nil. And if you think you don't have enough time, like if it saves you 1 ER visit, which what it is here in Canada, because I work in Ontario, it can be like 3 to 6 hours in the ER. And if you know how to evaluate that properly, how to treat it at home, or how to identify an emergency, that's going to be such a huge difference, whether it's in a prepping standpoint or just your everyday accidents.
Well, let's hope we can crash your website, because, you know, it's to get that kind of information from somebody like yourself who's been in a wilderness survival situation is invaluable. So, you know, if you can get that information for free, and then I presume that if you want to do some in-person stuff, then there's a bit of a cost premium for that. Yeah.
So if you want to do in-person training, we do offer weekend and week-long courses. Our next one is specific for cold weather survival and also cold weather injuries and illnesses. And just to give you a ballpark, it's about $2,000 for like a 4-day training. And if you are wanting to do the online training to get your feet wet, after that, right now we just started offering this education, so it's like $47 a month. Yeah. So pretty affordable for most families. And in addition to that, our curriculum also certifies people for wilderness first aid. And if you want to get your whole family on board, it's just one subscription. So I'm not asking you to have it for yourself, your wife, or your husband and your kids. You do it once and you get your whole family trained up. And that's the goal. I don't want to, it would be poor of me to want just one person in your unit to be trained. I want the whole family trained.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that it's not only for you or your family. It's, every day, you could be a potential assistance to somebody who's in need of help, right? So this is something I'd encourage people to definitely go and check out. I'm going to be checking it out because some of the stuff that you're talking about here, how to treat hypothermia, spinal injuries, stop the bleeding, fractures, psychological first aid, and then you talk about the wilderness survival component of it as well. And yeah, definitely check it out. And what else are you up to besides the Survival Doctors website? What are your future plans? Do you have a store or anything? Your YouTube channel, Instagram?
So I do short form videos and also long form videos as well. So if you just want free information, literally learn a life-saving skill within 60 seconds, you can definitely find me on Instagram, on YouTube, on TikTok. And what I'm going to be doing is a lot of live sessions. So a lot of live Q&As. A lot of my followers want to just say, hey, you have little access to a doctor who's knowledgeable not only about the survival space, but also the preparedness space. I have a question about this specific thing. So it kind of takes the guesswork out of it, because if you're reading blogs out there, there's just so much misinformation and just BS that would actually harm you if you actually followed those things.
And it's hard to get an actual doctor's advice on something. So guys, go subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I hope you start uploading a bit more frequently. I know you have a plan to do so. Hopefully once, this video is released, we're going to drive a lot of traffic your way, because I think you're an incredible asset to the community, and just want to thank you for coming out today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And I look forward to, learning a thing or two while we have you here. So I think we're going to head on over to the first aid station.
Yep.
And you're going to show me some life-saving techniques.
Let's get to it.
All right, man.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.